Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is Thursday morning. That is Bill Landis, and I am Austin Ward. And if you had on your bingo card May 25th and either one of us saying the name Joe Philbin, congratulations, you've hit bingo.
I did not have that on my bingo card. Have not thought about Joe Philbin at all in quite some time, really. Was quite surprised to see that he somehow ended up on our Ohio State radar. Was not ready for it.
Yeah, it popped out of nowhere, and in some ways that should help inform part of this conversation. You don't normally get a lot of coaching carousel impactful moves popping up in late May, and that's not to say that Joe Philbin does not bring value to the Ohio State coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff. I think that he will. I think that my take here, Bill, and certainly want yours, is that this is just an unexpected bonus, a situation that arose unexpectedly. It wasn't that necessarily Ohio State was, out there looking for more help, in need of more help, worried about Justin Fry or Mike Salini and needing somebody else to help coach the offensive line. I don't feel like that's the case at all. I think there was a coach looking for somewhere to do some work and a head coach in Ryan Day who's spent this offseason not really turning down any possible stones that he could flip over.
Yeah, why would you, if you can do it and you can swing it, and these positions are not typically ones that break the bank, in the grand scheme of things, because they're relatively low paid positions compared to what assistants and head coaches make. And it's like a guy who's been a coach for a really long time with extensive experience at the college and certainly NFL level. It's kind of a no-brainer. I don't think can't think of a downside to it. And if Joe Philbin wants to spend this year grinding tape and helping Brian Hartline and maybe giving a hand to Justin Fry and Mike Salini, then of course if you're Ryan Day, you do that. Especially I think in a world where he's trying to transition a little more into a CEO role. Like anyone you can bring into the building that allows you to be more hands off with something, I think is to Ryan Day's benefit. So I don't know. Like I said on the board at OhioState.Rivals.com that I think these things tend to get overblown a little bit, especially when it's a name that people recognize, like Joe Philbin's. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Like there's even if it's, I don't know, you look back a year from now and there's one thing that Joe Philbin helped you with, I think that's probably worth it.
Right. It does feel to me like, and I don't want to oversimplify it or minimize it. We have not talked to Joe Philbin or Ryan Day at this point about their motivations for making this deal. I don't know that we ever will talk publicly to Joe Philbin about it, with the exception of James Laurinaitis. I don't know that Ohio State has ever had any analysts or quality control people participate in interviews. I guess Riley Jeffers did one back with like a hometown Notre Dame television station, South Bend television station. So that would be the only two that I can think of that have ever happened. So we may not hear directly from him, but a way that a lot of this tends to work is like advanced scouting, brainstorming in coaches sessions, in the meeting room. I'm not sure that there will be, as I look at it and what I guess or project forward, there wouldn't be a lot of hands-on coaching from Joe Philbin with the current roster. Maybe I'll be wrong about that, but this does feel like looking for somebody to add another voice and another set of eyes for a couple weeks down the road with opponents so they can get a start on game planning, which is something that Joe Philbin has obviously done a lot throughout his career.
Yeah, it is unglorious work to do this kind of stuff, but it's like for football junkies who can't quit it. Like Joe Philbin could retire. I'm sure he's made quite enough money to retire and walk away from football if he wanted to. He's most recently the Cowboys offensive line coach, but clearly something is pulling him back to this. He's 61 years old. He's relatively young, I think, in coaching years. So he probably still feels like he has more time to do this job and more to offer to the sport. But he is like, I don't want to overstate the impact here, but he is kind of uniquely qualified to, I think, help Ohio State in two pretty important areas for Ohio State this year. One is his relationship as Brian Hartline's former NFL head coach and helping Brian in whatever way needed to transition into this role as offensive coordinator. I don't want to make it sound like he's going to hold Brian's hand through all this because Brian's not ready for it, but it's just another resource and a familiar one for Brian to lean on. And then Joe Philbin's got extensive offensive line background. He was Kirk Ferentz's first offensive line coach at Iowa. He was an offensive line coach in the NFL and in college for many, many years. It's his specialty. And while I think Justin Fry is a tremendous offensive line coach, and there's a lot to like about Mike Soleni and what he's going to be in his future too, can't hurt to have another set of eyes on that position in a year where they're transitioning in a major way. So I again, it's kind of beating a dead horse a little bit, I guess, but this can help Ohio State. And to what extent, I'm not sure, but I would be happy, excited, enthused about Ohio State adding someone of this caliber to their staff.
Yeah, it did seem like for a number of years, well, is Ohio State doing the same thing that Alabama is? And it was, but not at the same extent of high-profile coaches they were bringing in, which was Nick Saban had become this halfway house for recovering coaches who had, for whatever reason, washed out of their previous jobs, whether that was on the field or off the field or whatever. And so those people were garnering more headlines than, Keenan Bailey was, for example, or Todd Fitch. Like, this was still happening for Ohio State, but it wasn't done by grabbing headlines. So, and I think that they would still I think they would do even more if the rules had not been kiboshed for whatever reason by the NCAA to really open up and remove any cap on the number of coaches you could have. I think they were ready to do that, willing to go even further than they have. But I would still say that they've been more aggressive than most, even without getting the same level of acclaim as Alabama.
I think they have too, and that started the transition a little bit under Urban Meyer. Remember, was it 2017 where they had like Joker Phillips, who was the former Kentucky head coach, came in, and who was the guy from Ohio? Brian Knorr was like the former Ohio head coach who came in. And that was like, I think around the time when Saban started doing his coaches reform school, and people wanted Ohio State to copy that. I do think there's like a what's it called? When you get to the point of diminishing return, when you have too many of these people, like, you can keep collecting them, I guess, if you want to, so you can brag about it. But unless it gets to the point where, as you alluded to, those people can actually do things on the field, it's like, how many do you really need? So Nick Saban has a lot. Good for him, I guess. But Ohio State, I don't think has been particularly behind in this case, and it has had some, it's had former head coaches fill these roles. Paul Rose was another one. So, and they added Mike Dawson who was like Nebraska's former defensive line coach, who used to work with Ryan Day. I can't remember, at Boston College. Is that where they were together?
Yeah, and then he was with the Birds for a while, right?
I believe he was. Yeah. Lots of Birds connections here. Joe Philbin was the offensive coordinator when the Packers won the Super Bowl and beat the Birds in the playoffs. So,
that's not the right kind of connection for you.
We have mixed feelings about that one. But to get back to the point, no, Ohio State does not have an army of high profile analysts. I question the value of that sort of inherently, but Ryan Day, I think, has been quick to embrace the idea when it is presented to him, and this is another kind of example of that.
I have a lot of questions about you referring to it as collecting, and then that you could have diminishing returns at some point, knowing the way that your approach is. We don't have to get into that, but I'm pretty sure that you are an insatiable collector, and you would just be plucking every coach available on the market to come work on your staff.
Maybe there have to be some demonstrated value there, I think. And I wonder if that is a more or less volatile market than collecting sports trading cards. I don't know. I'd listen to arguments for both.
Yeah, I'd like to send Joe Philbin off to PSA and see what kind of grade we can get on a 61-year-old analyst. So the questions that we got right away at ohiostate.rivals.com about this, and you looked throughout his career. The first one was, and you alluded to his relationship with Brian Hartline, and you were asked, like, does this mean it's definitely happening now? Which it almost certainly is anyway. Like, is this meant to help Brian Hartline become an offensive play caller? Are these tied together somehow? And you found what about Philbin's coaching career?
that while he's held offensive coordinator titles twice with the Packers, and was a head coach at the Dolphins, he has not really been an extensive play caller in his career. He called plays for the Packers at the end of the 2018 season when Mike McCarthy got fired. He did not call plays when he was the head coach of the Dolphins, which actually kind of surprised me a little bit. But I suppose it makes sense. Like if he's like purely like he's not a former quarterbacks coach, he's an offensive line guy. And although I disagree with the practice, those offensive line coaches do not typically get a ton of chances to call plays. I think they should. I think more offensive line coaches should be head coaches, but I guess that's a topic for another day. Anyway, Joe Philbin does not. It's not like they're bringing in a long time college and NFL play caller to like be Brian Hartline Sherpa up this mountain. I think that the article I read that was dating back to Philbin's second stint with the Packers in 2018, when he became that interim head coach and then was also the play caller, it was the first time he had called plays since 1996 when he was the offensive coordinator at Northeastern, which is a college in Boston for anybody who doesn't know what Northeastern is. So I wouldn't take this as an indication that Brian Hartline is definitely calling plays this year. I think he will, or there'll be some sort of scenario there where he and Ryan Day will work on that together and eventually Hartline will take over. But this is not like, okay, it's stamped. This is definitely happening, but he's done it. Philbin has to some degree. He's been a head coach. He understands, I think, the machinations of play calling and the organization that's involved. So I think he can still be a helping hand with that.
This did not come from a question on OhioState.Rivals.com, but it was another take, a hottish one about this, that maybe it means Ryan Day, and I did allude to this earlier as well. I want to reinforce it and reiterate it. Maybe Ryan Day is not happy with Justin Fry or Mike Salini. And I will just go ahead and say that is 100% not the case.
Yeah. That leap in logic doesn't make much sense to me. We saw it at like one other publication. I hesitate to even call it a publication, but someone threw that idea sort of out into the ether that this is a signal on some level that Ryan Day thinks something is lacking with the offensive line coaching. And I assure you, and Austin can assure you, that is not the case. He can help. Joe Philbin can help. He's got like 4 decades worth of experience of offensive line coaching. He's been coaching the offensive line position, I think, maybe longer than Justin Fry has been alive, but he is not coming in to be like the shadow offensive line coach. Justin Fry is doing just fine.
It is interesting when you look at the offensive line, though, like how difficult that is when the coaching staff is capped the way it has been, and you need one full-time position coach, and they generally have one, graduate assistant type. For Ohio State, that's Justin Fry and Mike Salini now. But historically, in college football, it's like that's it. And you have those two people there. You're trying to allocate your resources. You have one person coaching quarterbacks. You have one, but you have like 16, 17 offensive linemen on your roster. Like,
yeah,
that's difficult. So if there is some way to spread out that load and by getting, like, that's one key benefit potentially here with someone with Joe Philbin's background. Sorry. At least I didn't call him Regis, but
you think they're related? Do we know that?
We've got a lot of research that we need to do. But I apologize for that slip of the tongue. Anyway, the point is, like, that's such a large position group. It's difficult to manage if you don't, and if you have an extra set of hands and eyes and anything else, like, that could only be a benefit.
It is odd. I guess I had never thought of the fact that, like, running back has 5 players and offensive line can have like 18, and the same number of coaches are coaching those groups.
It's a hard job.
Yeah, it is. That's why that's why I made the point of offensive line coaches to get more head coaching jobs, because you're basically coaching a quarter of the team by yourself anyway. I think there's value in learning how to run an entire roster when you coach a position that large. I think defensive line is perhaps similar, but offensive line is usually the largest position group on any one roster, and it is hard. And Ohio State did, like, maybe the thing we didn't talk about a ton when Kevin Wilson left to go to Tulsa is that he has an offensive line background as well. And while he didn't have the official title of offensive line coach or assistant offensive line coach, he was definitely another set of eyes and another set of hands to help Greg Studrawa at the time and Justin Fry last year just kind of manage that group a little bit. So you lost that, and this is a way to make up for it.
The other part that I thought was interesting, and it wasn't entirely broached this way, but it does. Like, people ask, well, maybe they should have been doing this with another defensive person. Could they've got an analyst on that side of the ball and bulked up that side of the staff? Ohio State did that pretty aggressively. They filled every available spot that they had. Plus, James Laurinaitis is about as high profile of an addition as you can have without being a former head coach or an NFL coach or anything else. That was a pretty big deal. They already did that. The other element to that was that they suggested that perhaps somebody else needed to help on special teams. I think this is a unique situation in that and I say, well, maybe, it wouldn't hurt to maybe have another person help on defense. If that was available to Ohio State right now, I think that Ryan Day would consider it and do it. But goes back to what I said to start this. It is a unique situation for a coach with this resume to still be looking for a place to go coach football or be around ball in late May. The carousel spins at different times than it has in years past. But when you have OTAs and rookie camps already starting at the NFL level, when you're already through spring ball at the college level, this is not generally the time that anybody is moving locations to go do that.
It's not. This is fairly unique. And I also say too, I apologize for not having the names handy because those are just not the kind of names I keep at the top of my head or front of mind. I think Ohio State did hire 2 quality control assistants to work on special teams in the offseason. And then in addition to that, the other people we've named in this episode already, like Mike Dawson is helping on the defensive side. James Laurinaitis is like basically the linebackers coach. And Larry got a new assistant too, Alan Clark, right? He's like a pass rush specialist, is helping Larry Johnson. So they do these things. They just fly a little more under the radar, I think. And I guess I understand anyone who thinks like those hires should be splashier. I think if you were thinking along those lines, I think you're maybe overvaluing what these positions do just a tad. Not to say they're unimportant, but like you don't need Bill Belichick coming to be a quality control assistant for your program to be successful. And I think Ohio State has done a fairly good job of addressing these positions when they've come up.
Yeah. So here's that full list for you on special teams. The 2 faces that are there, Robert Keys and Gunnar Daniel. Talked to them at the coaches clinic that you and I went to. That group was all working together there with Parker Fleming. The full list there defensively, you have Brent Zdebski, Sam McGrath, James Laurinaitis, Alan Clark, Garen Duhart, Joshua Chorba, and then Mike Dawson was the one that got a lot of attention because with his ties to Nebraska. Sean Banks is helping out Keenan Bailey with the tight ends now. Riley Larkin, Devin Jordan still there, of course, with the wide receivers. So, I mean, that's what do we name there? 10 people that are not full-time staff members. Not the Woody hasn't been expanded yet too, so there's not a bunch of free office space. Maybe if it's not a matter of money, it might be a matter of space.
Yeah, they can put those tents out in the parking lot again and just make office space out there like they were doing back when no one was allowed in the building.
Yeah, let's not go back to that period.
Yeah, please not.
I don't know. Is there anything else we can say about a May 25th addition to the coaching staff?
No, I mean, other than that, I think it is interesting, and I doubt we'll get to talk to Joe Philbin about this, but I will get to pick Ryan Day's brain about it, and probably Brian Hartline's too about the value added here. But like, I will never sit here and tell you that it is a bad thing for Ohio State to add a former NFL head coach into a job that is like typically reserved for like 23-year-olds who are surviving on ramen noodles and sleeping on someone's couch. So this is a nice hire for Ohio State.
There you go. You heard it there first from Bill Landis. Appreciate you joining us on a Thursday edition of the Podcast Daily. Maybe we'll throw together a Freaky Friday mailbag again. Maybe. Why not? Let's do that.
Why not?
And we'll get back to offensive line. We'll kick off next week maybe with that for Bill. As Memorial Day weekend, we'll spill right over into a tackle holiday next week on the Podcast Daily. Thanks again for joining us. For Bill, I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.